What happens when one of Britain's most beloved actors completely loses it on live television? In just 40 seconds, a simple question turned into an absolute meltdown that had Michael Caine storming off the set in fury. Before we get into this insane story, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. We bring you daily videos exposing Hollywood's darkest scandals, and trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. Last night, on Piers Morgan Uncensored, what started as a pleasant conversation about Michael Caine's legendary career quickly devolved into one of the most uncomfortable moments in talk show history. The tension in that studio was so thick you could cut it with a knife, and by the end, one of cinema's most iconic figures was walking out in disgust. Michael Caine arrived on set, looking every bit the distinguished gentleman we've come to know over his 6-decade career. Dressed in an impeccably tailored suit, the 89-year-old actor settled into the guest chair with that characteristic warmth and charm that's made him a household name. Piers Morgan, known for his confrontational interview style, seemed almost respectful at first, asking about Caine's early days in London and his breakthrough roles in films like Alfie and The Italian Job. "You've had an absolutely remarkable career, Michael," Piers said, leaning forward in his chair. "From working-class South London to Hollywood royalty. It's quite the journey." Caine smiled, that familiar Cockney accent still strong, despite decades of fame. "Well, I've been very fortunate, Piers. I've worked with some extraordinary people and had opportunities I never dreamed of as a young man." The conversation flowed easily through stories of working with directors like Christopher Nolan and co-stars like Jack Nicholson. Caine was animated, gesturing with his hands as he recounted amusing anecdotes from various film sets. He talked about the time he nearly quit acting before landing his breakthrough role, about the struggles of maintaining a career in an industry that constantly changes. "You know, Piers, when I started out, there was no such thing as overnight success," Caine explained, his eyes lighting up with the memory. "You worked for years in repertory theater, in television, doing whatever you could to keep your head above water. These days, everyone wants to be famous instantly." Piers nodded along, seemingly engaged. "It's quite different now, isn't it? Social media has changed everything about how people become famous." "Completely different," Caine agreed. "But I think the fundamentals remain the same. You've got to be willing to work hard, to take rejection, to keep going when everyone tells you you're not good enough. That's what separates the ones who last from the ones who flame out." The audience was eating it up, hanging on every word from the legendary actor. Caine had a gift for storytelling, a natural charisma that made even simple anecdotes feel profound and meaningful. For about 15 minutes, it was the kind of interview that everyone expected: warm, insightful, entertaining. Then Piers shifted gears. His expression changed slightly, that telltale sign that he was about to push into more controversial territory. There was a glint in his eye, that look he gets when he's about to go for the jugular. "Michael, I want to talk about something that's been quite divisive lately," Piers said, his tone taking on an edge. "You've been quite vocal about certain political issues, and some people have suggested that actors should stay out of politics altogether. What do you make of that?" Caine's smile faded just a touch. "Well, Piers, I think everyone's entitled to their opinion, whether they're an actor or a plumber. We're all citizens, aren't we?" "Yes, but don't you think there's something rather rich about millionaire actors lecturing ordinary working people about how they should think?" Piers pressed, leaning back with his arms crossed. "You live in a completely different world from most of your fans." The studio audience shifted uncomfortably. This was classic Piers Morgan, needling his guests until something interesting happened. But Michael Caine wasn't some young starlet who could be easily rattled. "I came from those ordinary working people, Piers," Caine said, his voice level but firm. "My father was a fish market porter. I grew up in a council flat. Don't lecture me about not understanding regular folks." Piers smiled that provocative smile of his. "But that was 70 years ago, Michael. You've been wealthy and famous for longer than most people have been alive. Surely you've lost touch with what life is actually like for working-class Britons? Have I now? Caine's eyes narrowed slightly. And what makes you the expert on working-class life? Last I checked, you've done quite well for yourself too. The temperature in the room was rising. Piers chuckled, clearly enjoying the pushback. I'm not the one making political pronouncements and telling people how to vote though, am I? Neither am I, Caine shot back. I share my views when asked, just like you do. Rather forcefully, I might add. But there's a difference, Piers continued, leaning forward now. When I share my views, I'm a journalist. It's my job to have opinions and to challenge people. When you do it, you're using your fame as a platform to influence people who admire you. Caine let out a sharp laugh. Oh, so when you do it, it's journalism. But when I do it, it's manipulation? That's convenient logic, Piers. I'm saying that celebrities have an unfair advantage, Piers explained, his voice rising slightly. People listen to you because they love your films, not because you have any particular expertise in politics or economics. And people listen to you because why exactly? Caine challenged. Because you shout louder than everyone else? Because you've made a career out of being controversial? The crew members exchanged worried glances. This was escalating faster than anyone had anticipated. Let's talk about Brexit then, Piers said, pulling out a tablet. You've said some rather harsh things about people who voted to leave the European Union. Called them misguided, if I recall correctly. Caine's jaw tightened. I said I thought it was a mistake, yes, I'm allowed to think that. But you called the voters themselves misguided, Piers repeated, emphasizing the word. That's quite insulting, isn't it? To suggest that millions of people who disagreed with you were simply too stupid to know better? That's not what I said, Caine countered, his voice rising slightly. And you know it. Don't twist my words, Piers. I'm not twisting anything, Michael. I'm reading your exact quotes. Piers held up the tablet. You said that people who voted for Brexit didn't understand the consequences. That sounds pretty condescending to me. The audience was dead, silent now, watching this increasingly heated exchange unfold. Michael Caine, typically so composed and gracious in interviews, was visibly frustrated. His hands gripped the armrests of his chair, and that famous voice had taken on a harder edge. Look, I expressed an opinion about a political decision, Caine said slowly, as if explaining something to a child. I didn't insult anyone personally. There's a difference. Is there? Piers challenged. Because it seems to me that you and your wealthy celebrity friends think you know better than everyone else. That your opinions matter more because you're famous. Oh, that's rich coming from you, Caine said with a bitter laugh. You've built your entire career on telling people what to think. At least, I don't pretend to be some champion of the common man while living in luxury and judging everyone else. I've never claimed to speak for the common man, Piers shot back defensively. But I do listen to them, which is more than you. You listen to them? Caine's voice dripped with sarcasm. Is that what you call it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you just shout over them until they agree with you or give up trying to argue. Piers's face was starting to redden. At least I'm willing to have these difficult conversations. At least I don't just retreat into my mansion and judge everyone from afar. I don't judge anyone, Caine insisted, his voice getting louder. I stated my opinion on a political matter. That's what people do in a democracy. Or have you forgotten what that means? Don't patronize me, Michael, Piers warned, pointing a finger across the desk. I'm trying to have a genuine discussion here, and you're getting defensive. Defensive? Caine laughed incredulously. You invited me here to talk about my career, and instead you're trying to paint me as some out-of-touch elitist. That's not a discussion, Piers. That's an ambush. The gloves were coming off now. Piers sat up, straighter, his own irritation starting to show through the professional veneer. I've never claimed to be anything other than what I am, Michael. I don't hide behind some folksy charm while looking down my nose at regular people. And I don't hide behind fake outrage and manufactured controversy to boost my ratings. Caine fired back, which is exactly what you're doing right now. The tension was palpable. What had started as a pointed exchange was rapidly becoming a full-blown argument. Piers Morgan's face was reddening, and Michael Caine looked like he wanted to be anywhere but in that chair. "Fake outrage?" Piers sputtered. "I'm genuinely concerned about the way celebrities like you use your platforms to push political agendas without any accountability." "Accountability?" Caine repeated. "You want to talk about accountability? Let's talk about your track record, shall we? Let's talk about all the times you've had to apologize for things you've said, or the times you've been fired from jobs for your behavior." "Oh, here we go," Piers said, throwing his hands up. "When you can't defend your own positions, just attack the person asking the questions. Very mature." "I'm not attacking you," Caine insisted. "I'm pointing out that you're not exactly in a position to lecture anyone about responsibility or accountability. You've made a career out of being provocative and then acting shocked when people get upset." A few members of the audience actually murmured in agreement with this. Piers heard it, and his jaw clenched visibly. "I'm simply asking you to defend your statements," Piers said, his voice rising. "If you're going to make political pronouncements, you should be prepared to back them up." "I don't need to defend anything to you," Caine said sharply. "And I certainly didn't come here to be ambushed with this nonsense." "Ambushed?" Piers laughed incredulously. "You're on a talk show, Michael. We talk about things. If you can't handle a few simple questions, maybe you shouldn't be making political statements in the first place." "Simple questions?" Caine's voice was getting louder now, his legendary composure finally cracking. "You're deliberately misrepresenting what I've said to make me look bad. That's not journalism. That's just being a bastard." The audience gasped. Michael Caine, the gentleman actor known for his professionalism and grace, had just sworn on live television. Piers Morgan's eyes lit up, realizing he'd gotten under his guest's skin in a major way. "Oh, so now we're resorting to name-calling?" Piers said with mock offense. "Very mature, Michael. Is this how you handle all criticism?" "Criticism?" Caine laughed bitterly. "This isn't criticism. This is you trying to make yourself look good by making me look bad. There's a difference, and everyone watching can see it. I think the audience can make up their own minds about who looks good here," Piers said, gesturing to the crowd. "I'm asking legitimate questions, and you're losing your temper." "You want to talk about maturity?" Caine leaned forward, his famous voice dripping with contempt. "You built your career on phone hacking scandals and then reinvented yourself as some moral arbiter. You're a hypocrite, Piers, and everyone knows it." The studio went completely silent. This was no longer a heated debate, this was personal. Piers Morgan's face had gone from red to nearly purple, and his practiced smirk had disappeared entirely. The crew behind the cameras looked at each other with wide eyes, unsure whether they should keep rolling or cut away. "How dare you?" Piers said, his voice low and dangerous. "I was cleared of any wrongdoing in that investigation, and you know it." "Were you?" Caine challenged. "Not backing down an inch. Or did you just get lucky? Because there are plenty of people who think otherwise. Plenty of people who remember exactly what went on at those newspapers." "This is completely out of line," Piers said, his voice shaking now with genuine anger. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" Caine pressed. "You want to sit there and question my credibility, my right to have political opinions, but you can't handle it when someone questions yours? That's the definition of hypocrisy, Piers. The difference is that I was investigated and cleared," Piers shot back. "You're just throwing around baseless accusations because you don't like being challenged." "Baseless?" Caine's eyebrows shot up. "The phone hacking scandal destroyed lives, Piers. People went to prison. Newspapers were shut down. And you just happened to escape unscathed? Come on. This is unbelievable," Piers sputtered, looking at the cameras. "You come on my show, and you have the audacity to bring up something I was completely exonerated from, just because you can't defend your own elitist views." "Elitist views?" Caine stood up now, yanking at his microphone. "I grew up with nothing, Piers. Absolutely nothing. My family struggled every single day. I worked my way up from the bottom, and I've never forgotten where I came from. You, on the other hand, seem to have forgotten every dodgy thing you've ever done the moment it became inconvenient to remember. Piers stood as well, pointing his finger at Caine. Sit down, Michael. We're not finished here. Oh, I think we are, Caine said, pulling off his microphone with a sharp tug that made the sound crew wince. I've dealt with some difficult people in my career, but you might just take the cake. You're not interested in conversation. You're interested in humiliation. If you walk out of here, you're just proving my point, Piers called after him, his voice rising to almost a shout. You can dish it out, but you can't take it. That's your problem, Michael. My problem? Caine turned back, and for a moment, it looked like he might return to his seat for another round. But then he shook his head, that famous face twisted in disgust. No, Piers. My problem is that I foolishly thought this would be a professional interview. My problem is that I gave you the benefit of the doubt when everyone warned me not to. Everyone warned you? Piers mocked. Who warned you? Your other celebrity friends who can't handle being questioned either. You know what your problem is, Piers, Caine said, his voice carrying across the studio with that unmistakable authority that had commanded screens for decades. You think being provocative makes you important. You think stirring up conflict makes you relevant. But all it really does is make you exhausting. I've met tabloid journalists with more integrity than you. The audience was completely silent now. Some people leaning forward in their seats, others looking away uncomfortably. This had gone from entertainment to genuinely painful to watch. Get out then, Piers shouted, his composure completely gone now. His face was bright red, and his hands were shaking. If you can't handle a real conversation, then leave. Go back to your mansion and your celebrity friends who only tell you what you want to hear. Gladly, Caine said, his voice steady despite the chaos. He turned to the audience, many of whom looked shocked at what they were witnessing. I apologize that you had to see this. I came here thinking we'd have a nice chat about films and life, about the industry and my experiences. Instead, I got ambushed by someone more interested in controversy than conversation. You're the one who started throwing insults, Piers protested, his voice cracking slightly. You're the one who brought up things that have nothing to do with anything. No, Piers, Caine called back without stopping his march toward the exit. You started this the moment you decided to twist my words and make this about politics instead of the conversation we were supposed to be having. The difference between us is that I actually care about being honest. You just care about being loud. Don't you dare walk away from me, Piers shouted, moving toward the edge of the stage as if he might follow. You're being incredibly rude. This is my show. Caine stopped at the edge of the set and turned back one final time, his eyes blazing. You want to talk about rude? You invited me here under false pretenses, misrepresented my views, brought up political issues that had nothing to do with why I agreed to come, and then acted offended when I called you out on it. That's not just rude, Piers. That's pathetic. Security, Piers called out, though it was unclear what he wanted them to do, since Caine was already leaving of his own accord. This is my show, and I decide when the interview is over. Not anymore, Caine said simply, his voice cutting through all the noise with perfect clarity. Not today. And with that, one of Britain's most beloved actors walked off the set of Piers Morgan Uncensored, leaving the host standing alone in front of a stunned audience, cameras that were still rolling. The sound of Caine's footsteps echoed through the silent studio, each step deliberate and final. Piers Morgan stood there, breathing heavily, his carefully constructed persona completely shattered. He looked at the cameras, then at the audience, then back at the empty chair where Michael Caine had been sitting just moments before. His hands were trembling slightly, and there was a sheen of sweat on his forehead. Well, he said, his voice still shaking with anger and perhaps a touch of embarrassment. I suppose that's what happens when you ask celebrities tough questions. They run away. They can't handle being challenged on their privileged views. But the audience wasn't buying it. A few people actually stood up and walked out themselves, apparently siding with Michael Caine in this spectacular showdown. Others were shaking their heads, and one woman near the front was actually booing. The rest sat in uncomfortable silence, unsure of what they'd pretension towards. Just witnessed. "Stay in your seats, please," one of the producers called out, trying to maintain some semblance of order, but the damage was done. The carefully orchestrated atmosphere of the show had been completely destroyed. Piers tried to continue, to move on to his next segment, but his heart clearly wasn't in it. He kept glancing at the exit where Caine had disappeared, as if expecting the actor to come back and finish the argument. But of course, that wasn't going to happen. Backstage, crew members could hear Michael Caine's voice as he removed the rest of his microphone equipment. 40 years in this business, he was saying to someone, his distinctive voice still carrying that edge of anger. 40 bloody years, and I've never been treated with such disrespect. That man is a disgrace to journalism. A complete and utter disgrace. A production assistant tried to apologize, but Caine waved her off. "Not your fault, love. You're just doing your job. It's him. It's always him. I should have known better than to come here." Back on set, Piers Morgan was trying to continue the show, but the energy had completely deflated. He attempted to make jokes, to minimize what had just happened, but it was clear that this interview had gone disastrously wrong. Even his most devoted supporters in the audience seemed uncertain about what they'd witnessed. "I stand by my questions," Piers said defensively to the camera, but his voice lacked its usual conviction. If Michael Caine can't handle being challenged on his political views, that says more about him than it does about me. That's all I'm saying. But as the show cut to a commercial break, everyone in that studio knew the truth. What was supposed to be a friendly chat with a legendary actor had turned into an ugly confrontation, and regardless of who was right or wrong, it had ended with one of cinema's most respected figures walking out in disgust. The makeup artists and camera operators exchanged knowing looks. This would be everywhere by morning. The video of the confrontation would be everywhere within hours, with people taking sides and debating who had crossed the line. But in that moment, as Michael Caine disappeared through the studio doors and Piers Morgan stood alone on his set, one thing was crystal clear. This was one interview that neither man would forget anytime soon. The door slammed behind Michael Caine with a resounding bang that echoed through the studio like a gunshot. Piers Morgan flinched at the sound, his face still flushed with anger and something else, perhaps embarrassment, at how quickly the interview had spiraled out of control. The door slamming seemed to snap everyone out of their shocked stupor. The audience began murmuring among themselves, and the crew sprang into action, unsure of whether to keep filming or cut to black. He looked at his producers in the control booth, who were frantically gesturing at him through the glass, but he waved them off, dismissively, as if he didn't need their input or their concern. "That," Piers said to the camera, his voice tight and strained, "is what happens when you ask Hollywood elites to actually explain themselves. They can't handle it. They can't handle being questioned by someone who won't just fawn over them and accept whatever they say as gospel. They want to be praised and celebrated, not challenged." The audience remained mostly silent, with only a few scattered claps from people who seemed to agree with Piers's assessment, though even they sounded uncertain. But the majority looked uncomfortable, shifting in their seats and glancing at each other with uncertain expressions. A woman in the third row was shaking her head, and a man near the aisle had his arms crossed, looking distinctly unimpressed. This wasn't the entertaining confrontation they'd expected. It had been genuinely unpleasant to watch, like witnessing a car crash in slow motion. In the hallway outside the studio, Michael Caine was pulling on his jacket with sharp, angry movements, each gesture betraying the fury still coursing through him. A production assistant approached him cautiously, holding his coat and a bottle of water, her face apologetic and worried. "Mr. Caine, I'm so sorry about what happened in there," she started, her voice small and nervous. "We had no idea he was going to." Caine held up a hand, stopping her mid-sentence. His face softened slightly when he looked at her, the anger giving way to kindness for just a moment. "Not your fault, love," he said, his voice softer now but still edged with frustration. "You did your job beautifully. You and all the crew in there are professionals. It's your boss who's the problem. The man has no respect for anyone, including his own staff by the looks of it." He took the coat and water with a nod of thanks, then turned to his assistant, who'd been waiting nervously in the green room during the entire debacle. "Get the car," he said, simply, his voice returning to that clipped, controlled tone. "We're done here. We're leaving now." As Michael Caine walked toward the exit, his distinctive silhouette disappearing down the corridor, his footsteps echoing on the polished floor. Back in the studio, Piers Morgan was attempting to salvage what was left of his show, but the damage was done, and everyone watching knew it. This wasn't a moment of powerful journalism or compelling television. It was an ugly display of egos clashing, and it had ended with one of Britain's most treasured actors walking away in disgust.